Good evening. We are entering our work session. I'm sorry we got a little bit behind, but we're going to do good. We're going to get it through. This is our welcome to our monthly agenda setting, and we got 3 areas, and public input is always welcomed. And the first set of our input will be input discussion will be around consent items, zoning-related items, and old and new business. And there are agendas out in the hallway if you don't have one. So we're going to move right along with our first set of items on our agenda, our consent agenda. And is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to 1 through 13? Any comments? Okay. Jean has just informed me that commissioners need to take off or pull off what they want off the consent first. Is there anything that commissioners would like to pull off?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Item number 15.
Oh, wait a minute, are we there?
This is up to
15?
1 to 13.
We're 1 to 13.
1 through
I'm
13.
sorry, okay.
1 to 13.
I wanted to just take really quickly number 10,
Number 10.
just for a comment.
Okay. Commissioner Myers? Anybody else? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to any items on the agenda 1 through 13 minus 10? Minus 10. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll
Move to 10.
move to 10.
Do we have to do public comment for those items?
I've just asked.
Oh, I thought that was public comment for the consent agenda.
This is consent.
1 through 13.
Yeah, 1
Oh.
to 13.
Okay,
And you pulled 10.
yeah, so we're not going to talk about 10 till we get to the rest of the agenda.
No, we're going to, I guess since we don't have any other comments from anybody, I'll move that to, under new business.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so, wow, that's easy. Is there a motion on the floor from any commissioner to adopt the consent agenda items?
We're just talking.
Okay,
Just review.
okay.
When I voted.
So we're good tonight then. All right, so then we're going to move to our zoning-related items. And I believe Brad is here, and they told me I did not have to move, Brad.
Yeah, which is also not, this one right on white.
Yes, sir.
Ready when you are?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're waiting. I was making notes.
Oh,
Yes,
that's okay.
yes.
All right. No screen presentations this evening. We have 2 text amendments and then a map update that I'll explain to you when we get to that item, but it's really straightforward, I promise. So first item is, let's see. We're type 5 planning actions first. Item number 14. And this one comes to you. This is a staff-initiated text amendment. And what we are asking for your consideration within the procedure section of the zoning ordinance, it lays out ways by which applicants have the right to appeal decisions made by this group and by the planning commission or by the hearings board for staff level decisions. And we make those all the time, every day. Determinations on use, determinations on a variety of things. If an applicant disagrees with or is denied a permit, which ultimately that decision lies on me as the director. They have a right to appeal that to what right now is the hearings board. And what we're asking for you to, it's really, I think the planning department's the only department, as I understand, within the government that operates like we do, that if there's an appeal, it goes to an appointed board and not to our administrative hearing officer. And so in consultation with our attorney's office, we feel like it would be more appropriate, given the nature of some of these appeals that end up in front of the hearings board, to move those to the hearings officer instead. Our hearings board does a great job, but they're a 7-member group of appointed citizens, and sometimes the information that they are presented in these appeals can become very legal very quickly. And so we feel like our AHO is better suited to be the person to receive those appeals and rule on them. And that's what this change does. It just simply makes the required changes there. There's also kind of an attached set of amendments to Chapter 1 of the ordinance that is, it's not something that you've got a recommendation from the Planning Commission on because they don't have authority in Chapter 1 to do that, but they've been drafted by the Attorney's Office, and it just simply sets forth the role of the Administrative Hearing Officer in planning-related appeals in Chapter 1 because they've got to follow zoning procedure laws, even though it's the AHO. So that's it. Fairly straightforward. Planning Commission recommends approval.
Okay. With that, our number 14 on our agenda, is there any comments from anybody from the audience that'd like to speak to item number 14? Okay. Oh, 14. 14? No 14. Okay. Commissioners, any thought?
I have a question. Who is the hearing officer, and how's the hearing officer appointed? And then could you give some examples of the kinds of, appeals that have had to go through this process?
Our administrative hearing officer currently is our municipal court judge.
Okay.
That serves in that role as well. We don't do these very often, and that's what I told the Planning Commission. In my tenure, we may have taken 4 or 5 appeals to our hearings board during the last 20-plus years. But we have taken some that, examples, we had one dealing with a fuel center on Baxter Street, and they had a required minimum floor area ratio, and they wanted the area under the gas canopy to count towards their floor area. And my interpretation of that was not, based on the definition of floor area, it did not qualify. They disagreed. We go to the hearings board and make our arguments, and then they rule one way or the other. That was fairly straightforward. And other ones, there may be times when we are engaged in an active litigation that part of the first steps of that process are to exhaust all your administrative options, one of which would be to go to the hearings board. In that case, we're standing in front of them, and the applicant has got attorneys and briefs and stacks of papers this thick, and that's where they're really just not set up. And they will be the first to acknowledge that, I think, to you, to hear those types of actions.
Thank you.
But this is not a regular, this isn't a regular occurrence.
Okay.
Commissioners, are there any thoughts or discussion? Okay. Now we'll move down to number 15.
Okay. 15 is the proposed set of text amendments that, gosh, these go back several years. Comes out of the most recent recommendation of government operations, I believe, happened in November of 2022, which is when that came out of GOC and went to the commission, where the commission recommended to the manager to proceed with the preparation of these amendments, which we have done. It's been a year and a little bit, but part of that was that the series of recommendations that came out of GOC were really threefold. One was establishment of the amendments, but that was also in conjunction with an RFP to identify a third-party vendor to help in the tracking of these properties, where they were. And then there was also work associated with resources, things like that, and I believe you have another item on your agenda tonight for consideration regarding a staff position. These all had to kind of sync up at the end in order to come through. If the text amendment would have been done very quickly, for example, and we're still waiting on that third-party vendor because our RFP process takes some time to get through, we've got an ordinance, but we have no way of knowing at that point who's legal nonconforming and is vested. So that's kind of why, and I know there's been some aggravation as why is this taking so long, but that's why it took the number of months that it did, is everything kind of had to come in at the same time. And so that's where we are this evening. The amendments, are largely reflect the recommendations of the GOC. We have an ordinance right now that does not define short-term rentals. It doesn't show up in any of the use charts in terms of what they are or where they can go. And so that was really step one, is that these amendments need to create definitions for short-term rental, which there are 3 of them: general short-term rental, and then the short-term rental commercial and short-term rental home occupation. And I'll explain those in just a second. And then once you create those definitions, you've got to plug those into where it is deemed appropriate within the different zoning districts as to where they should be permitted, where they shouldn't be permitted, based on which type they are, and where they may be marginally okay, but probably need special use consideration through this body with a special use permit. And so that's kind of where all this comes together. So we've got the definitions, and then we go through the different zoning districts and put them in what we recommended to Planning Commission that we thought were appropriate. Beginning in the AR zone, they are a special use in the AR zone unless you are in what we define as an AR neighborhood, in which then they are not permitted nor eligible for the special use permit. The AR neighborhoods were created several years ago in the code and are treated very much like RS zones from different aspects. So that's why those are pulled out. Single-family zones, they are commercial, and I'm talking about commercial short-term rentals. Commercial being properties purchased as an investment, and nobody lives there full-time, and it is strictly used for short-term rental purposes. Not permitted in the single-family zones at all. You get into the multifamily zones, and they are a special use permit that would be considered by this group ultimately for approval based on their specific criteria. And as you're aware, with special use permits, they're going to bring you a binding plan, they're going to provide information, and it affords you the ability as the elected body to place conditions on an approval if you deem that to be appropriate. And then we get into the commercial zones. They are permitted in our commercial zones, but they are established as a use, very much like a bed and breakfast use or any other use, that if you're going to establish one of these commercial short-term rentals, you're establishing a new use of the property. And therefore, like any other new use, it's a change of use from what it was prior. It goes through our plan review process. It's reviewed by all the departments for assurance that it meets code, from the building inspection department and our fire marshal's office for occupancy to parking requirements, to all of those things are taken into consideration. We get into the industrial areas, and it's a mix. It's permitted in EO, it's a special use in EI, and it's not permitted in our heavy industrial zones. So that's kind of the breakdown, and where as you move through this series of amendments, that's what you're seeing is we've defined it, now we've plugged them in the different zones for your consideration. That's dealing with commercial short-term rental, as I explained a minute ago. Then we've got the second type of option, and that's what we define as a short-term rental home occupation. And it is, in that scenario, we have plugged in short-term rental as a use within our home occupation ordinance, similar to office, similar to, I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do. You can do a very small-scale beauty shop. You know, it's limited to one chair in certain provisions. You can do very limited dog grooming as a home occupation with stipulations. And so we've also said, and you can also do short-term rental as a home occupation, first and foremost, the primary use of that structure is it's your home, and you live there. And then you would get a home occupation permit to operate it. I mean, we don't get a lot of complaints on those. It does not say that you have to own the property, nor does our home occupation ordinance for any of the other uses say you have to own it. But first and foremost, it has to be your primary residence, and we're going to determine that like we already do. You know, obviously, if you've got a homestead exemption, you're going to qualify, you're going to own the property, and it is your primary residence. You come get a home occupation permit, that's an administrative permit through the planning department, go to finance and do your occupation tax certificate, and you're good to go. If you rent the property, you can still apply, and you're afforded all the same rights as the property owner would be, with the additional caveat that you have to have written approval of the property owner in order to run a business out of a property that you're renting. So that's not saying you can't do it, but it's an additional step. And that's not, again, that's not specific to just the short-term rental. Any home occupation that you're renting is required to do that. It has been for many years. So those are kind of how we've broken it up into the two areas of consideration in terms of use and where you can do that. The third part is dealing with how are we going to deal with legal nonconforming properties, because we know there's several hundred of them out there. We won't know exactly how many or where they are until we have the consultant on board with us. That's part of what their proposal they would do for us, is to identify these properties. We have established a section in the code for those in terms of legal nonconforming uses that first, upon bringing in the consultant, there would be the creation of an initial legal nonconforming list of properties. And those are going to be properties that at some point during the 12-month period prior to the September 19th adoption of the moratorium that we're currently still under, you operated your property as a short-term rental at some point during that prior 12 months. And if you did, you're going to be on the list of that you're a legal nonconforming property and continue to enjoy the same rights that you had prior to the moratorium. Then there will be a 6-month period following. We're going to publish that list upon its completion and also have the copies of it available in our department. If you've done short-term rental, you go and look at the list and your property is not on there, but you feel like you should have been on there, there's a 6-month period built in following the publishing of that list where you can come to us and apply for consideration to be added to that list. And we've set forth the provisions on how that works. You know, you would make your argument, you would demonstrate that in fact you had done it, and here's my proof. We've got an opportunity to review it, and we've built in yet an additional measure of kind of process in it that if, for whatever reason, we deem that we don't see any proof here that you actually did rent it, I can't put you on that list, then you would go through an appeal process, and it still affords you that too. So we worked through all of that. We established a list. 6 months later, ideally, we finalize that list, and everybody that wants to appeal has appealed, and then it all sets forth in motion from there. The way that we presented how you would lose your legal nonconforming status to the Planning Commission was either by sale of the property, and we've outlined all this in the proposal you've got. If you sell the property, you lose your nonconforming status. I cannot transfer that to the next owner, and we feel like that's certainly the most, that's the staff recommendation that we felt was the most appropriate. If you abandon the use of the property, if you go for a 12-month period and you don't rent it or advertise it, you've lost your legal nonconforming status, and that's something that the vendor will help us to track on a regular basis. And then the Planning Commission added a third caveat to it, which was a sunset provision that said regardless of sale or abandonment, at the end of a 2-year period from wherever that official date of determination begins, if you're legal nonconforming, you sunset at the end of 2 years, and you've either got to bring your property into compliance, or you've got to abandon the use of it from short-term rental if you're unable to bring it into compliance. So that's a recommendation that you have in front of you this evening, is a 2-year sunset provision on top of the other things we've talked about. And I guess I'll leave it at that. It was a split vote by the Planning Commission, but it does come forward to you with a recommendation to approve with the changes noted. And we gave you a little cover memo that gives you some history on top of it and the nature of the changes that the Planning Commission made.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, we're going to open this back up to our audience, our guests. Anybody would like to speak to item number 15? Please come forward, give your name, residence, and...
Did you want me to put a card here? Hi, my name is Hillary Rustin, and I live at 145 Millage Terrace. And I have short-term rentals on either side of the property that we live in, and they're wonderfully maintained by people who live on the property and have very strict rules. And it's their home, and they care about it, and we've never, ever had a problem. I also, I think that that's a very common thing to happen in the neighborhood. Prior to that, that property was owned by a negligent landlord who owned 2 properties, and they were a fraternity overflow, and it was fraternity parties often 3-4 nights a week. At that point, I had 2 little kids. I was teaching 8th grade. I was also in school, and at 3 in the morning, sofa would go out the window. It was regular. And at that point, we had a really good police department that worked with code enforcement, and they made it very inconvenient for that landlord to do that. It was out of compliance for a neighborhood. We had invested in a house that was a modest price at that point, but it was a neighborhood to raise kids, and that was not, we didn't expect that. They sold it to the woman who lives there now, and she retired, and so she's doing that income from the short-term rental. So I wanted to add that because I think code enforcement was really important to make that change, to make it a neighborhood residence. I'm speaking tonight about the sunset provision, and I just don't know enough about it, but it doesn't seem right to me. It seemed like other communities like New York and other places made it a relatively immediate thing. To me, like the people who invested in a neighborhood, live in a home, and then somebody out of state manages like a motel with 16 people coming in and out in an in-town community is inconsistent with having to have a job and, raise kids and do all the things. So I don't feel like the people who live here and work here their rights should have to wait 2 years when they've already waited a year and this moratorium and everything is still going on and they're suffering. So I feel like that should be reconsidered. And I know I don't know enough about the legal ramifications, but I hope that the commissioners look carefully into reducing the 2-year for the people who do. I don't live in that situation, but for the people who do. So that's my thoughts. And I'm really grateful for all the work that you're doing on this and all the work that you do to make Athens a great place. And I know it's a lot of details. I've been thankful to have all the information and read about it too.
Thank you, Ms. Rustin. Would anybody else like to speak to item number 15?
Hi, I'm Clint Moore. I'm at 228 Parkway Drive, and I just want to say that I'm pleased with the work of this body moving forward with addressing some ordinances. And I might have more to say on February 6th, but as I kind of read through the material and adjust it more. But first thing, though, I did want to say it's just a general concern when I was reading through the Planning Commission minutes from January, that there was interest expressed in seeing data on complaints prior to approving the ordinance. And I just want to just kind of bring up a general principle that The officially recorded complaints are just not a good barometer for measuring nuisance by short-term rentals. In my case, I have a short-term rental across the street from me, and I have had to call the police on one occasion for a disturbance, but for other violations of house rules, I've contacted the owner in Oregon directly. So there's just a general principle that I'm thinking that lack of involvement of officials doesn't indicate absence of nuisance from these short-term rentals. So I would just urge the mayor and commissioners to keep that in mind as you're looking at these ordinance revisions. I also had a question that I would like resolved in some way. If a citizen brings to light the existence of a non-conforming short-term rental, whose burden is it to prove that it is or it isn't? If the owner denies that it's a short-term rental, is that the end of the issue? So I'd just kind of like that clarified somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Would anybody else like to speak to item number 15 on the agenda? Okay. Well, we'll open it up to our, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to recommend that we hold this and continue to work on this. One reason being, we talking about bringing in a consultant. Not sure when that consultant is going to come on, but hopefully that consultant will be able to provide us with a lot more information once their work is done. I'm not sure how long our monitoring will run, but if we're bringing on a consultant, I don't want to go ahead and pass something, then all of a sudden consultants can come in and say, well, we be doing this, this, and this. So I would recommend that we hold this till the consultants get hired, and then hopefully try to make a concerted and a good decision for our community with regards to our short-term rental. And I do have one question. You say if somebody sell the property, they can't continue to be short-term, but what if they inherit the property? Did we think about that if somebody passed away and they pass it down to a child? Would that individual, I know there's a difference between selling and inheritance, so is that any thought been put behind that one?
Maybe one I need to look into, but I mean, my initial thought is that it would be change of ownership, but maybe it wouldn't. We'll get you an answer on that one.
Okay.
While I'm speaking,
Okay.
and thank you for your first comment, because I meant to point this out as part of my presentation. Text amendments are handled a little differently than everything else that you do when I'm sitting up here with you. You don't have the authority under our code to hold text amendments. For whatever reason, you've got to either vote to approve them or deny them. So that's the bad side of it. The good side of it is that if you just couldn't get comfortable, and it also goes a step further and does not explicitly say you have the right to even add conditions where it does everywhere else in the code. If you were to deny it based on the fact, I'm not sure this is quite ready yet, I'd like to see this added, and this added to it, you could deny it and then direct staff through the manager's office to immediately make those modifications and represent to the planning commission. There's no 12-month waiting period like there is. I can tell you that we're very close with contracting on the third-party consultant. We're waiting for that executed contract to be returned to us. So I don't think we're talking months before we can get them on board. But unfortunately, we don't have the ability to hold for 40 days.
Okay.
Sorry.
And it's good to know. And I guess I want us to be really thoughtful to putting this together. I want to be rushed.
No.
And again, I'm still not up to the spot where I think I need to be, so I can make an intelligent decision when we vote on this. But thank you, Brad, and I thank y'all for the work y'all done. I really appreciate it. But I just think that for me, I would really. Now you're saying we can't do it because we wait for a consultant.
We'll
What
have.
he's saying is you could vote to deny, but with the understanding you're gonna send it back, basically, planning
Okay.
commission, correct, Brad?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Brad,
And-
could you
and we will have you, we'll have you postured for your voting meeting that, and everything in place from an administrative side, that if you chose to take that action and return it for further work with some specific direction, you could also extend the moratorium the same night if that was your decision as an elected body to do so for a time certain in order to have that returned to you.
Okay.
Brad, could you clarify to everyone who the third-party consultant is?
What their scope of
What
work
the
is.
scope is?
Oh, yes, their scope of work basically will be from the beginning of establishing who's operated. That was the biggest first step that we needed to have them on board with, is anytime you adopt a new ordinance with new restrictions, you're going to create legal nonconforming uses that are out there that are allowed to continue to do what they've been doing. We don't know who all of those are right now. And
And I
that's,
think that's good information we need to have.
that's the first and most important thing, and then they will routinely monitor and track and check in conjunction with the employee, provided that is funded, that you're hearing later this evening, to make sure that the list that we have now versus what they're seeing, we've had 8 new ones pop up on 2 of the private sites this month that we noticed. Did they come through and get their home occupation permit, or did they go through plan review and are legal? And if not, then they will assist code enforcement in providing notification to those people that there are processes and here's what you need to do to come into compliance.
Now, Brad, if I might, so I don't want to confuse folks with consultant, make sure, Brad, that I understand correctly. So it's not so much a consultant as it's a software company, and we're buying the software, and they're going to help us set it up, but it shouldn't substantively change the policy content that we're discussing.
Right.
So I just want to be clear about that, Commissioner Fisher.
I mean, it could though. I mean, we don't know. I disagree with you on that one.
No, that's fine. And I'm just clarifying. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but Brad, do you see a lot of changes that can come out of that? Or Commissioner Fisher's suggesting that we hold it, which is fine, but do you think things will change materially when we get the software and install it? Are there some revelations there for us?
I don't think so. Consultant's probably not a good word, because consultant, and thank you for that clarification, vendor is maybe a better word, because they're not coming in to tell us how to do this. They're coming in to provide technical assistance that we don't have as Athens-Clarke County staff at the level that they do to track and ensure compliance with the ordinances that you pass. And that's kind of what their strong suit would be with the software that they provide.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to try to start looking to my left, but it's Commissioner Davenport, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Myers, Commissioner Culpepper, Commissioner Houle, Commissioner, what's your name? Hamby.
Everyone.
Y'all know what order y'all were in, right? Okay.
So I tend to support this, and I thank staff and the planning commission. It's a lot to take in, and we've been working on this for quite some time. I think this is going to bring a lot of maybe somewhat of happiness for some of these neighborhoods, these single-family neighborhoods who've been burdened by some of these party houses. But just one more time, because I've read this thing 3 times to where my brain is like water right now, but can you explain again, if we deny this, the next step would be to 1 year?
No.
No, my recommendation would be, if you were to deny this, I've read it, I'm generally comfortable with the content, but I'd really like consideration of this, and this to be added to it. You would deny it and then direct the manager to have us prepare a revised version with the direction that's provided by this group, and immediately take it back at the next available planning commission once we were able to make those changes, and then go ahead and extend the moratorium for the minimum period of time necessary for us to do that work for you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I appreciate you walking us through that and clarifying, not holding, but it would be a deny with direction
Yes.
going. So one question is, the consultant can continue to, pardon? Vendor, sorry, my notes were back when we were saying.
That's probably because I've been
The vendor-
referring to it all night.
The
It's-
vendor,
yeah.
the vendor can continue to work with you guys if this isn't passed at
Absolutely.
the earliest convenience. And then remind me, I think it's February 6th, midnight, that the moratorium runs out. So if, we just need to be prepared if we deny and direct, just for procedure-wise, we need to also extend the moratorium, which doesn't allow more new. It just is, with the clarity of the rules is not set yet. But what is set is a moratorium on new.
It
Was that
allows
correct?
the existing users that are out there to continue to do what they've done. It just.
The good ones, to do the good stuff.
It does not allow for the establishment of new ones under an ordinance that is yet to be adopted.
Okay.
If you were there operating on the 19th, you can keep on operating, but you weren't supposed to establish after that date.
Or if you sold yours, it doesn't change because those rules haven't changed.
And that's one of the other things that the vendor's going to be able to provide us with information on, is it appears, based on the work, and they do it every day, that in fact, 14 new properties since September 19th, for example, have started listing. And technically, there was a moratorium, and then we have to pursue that. And hopefully, they're all in locations that we can get them in compliance through the processes set forward in the new amendment.
Right. And then, so during this moratorium, though, someone who runs an Airbnb can sell that property and it continue to be an Airbnb. And then, can you send us an email? I'm interested in seeing the text amendment that the planning department crafted, because this one is the one that came after planning commission. So if you could just send all of us, because I just want to compare those.
I can. It may be easier, and I'm happy to send you an email. But on the second page of the memo that's on top of the amendment that came to you from Bruce,
Right.
there's 3 bullet points. Those were the only changes. We presented to them, and we refer to this as short-term vacation rental. And they asked that the term vacation be removed from all reference in the ordinance, and we've done that. They tweaked the wording on the days, and I can clarify that for you. And then they added the 2-year sunset provision that was not included in our recommendation to them. That was really the only changes that they made.
Okay, and that's captured in the memo
Yes.
before the draft?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, on the second
Well,
page.
thank you for that clarification.
Like, we're learning a lot tonight.
But
Now I
Brad,
know why Kelly sits back, so he can see the
Yeah.
whole room. So Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I'm appreciative of all the work that the planning department did on this, the GOC originally, and the planning commission as well. I am in support of this. I've spent a lot of time on it because I've had some serious issues with this in my, in my district. And more than, we have 3 weeks, I think, between now and the voting meeting. So if any of my colleagues, want to hash it out with me, I have spent a lot of time with this because I have a couple of constituents who have spent a lot of time with me on this. And really, the only addition here that we have that's substantive is the addition of the sunset for 2 years, which would take any of the non-conforming, which is the old word that's not really correct to use now, the grandfathering in, and have everything have to be conforming moving forward. And I think this is especially important for our residential neighborhoods and where people are expecting, we have zoning on purpose. We haven't gotten rid of all zoning. We have people who talk to us about, fears that we're going to get rid of single-family zoning. Well, we have zoning for residential areas. And the situation is simply that our Airbnbs have been created in the last 10 years or so using the internet to create a new kind of, visiting place to stay that we didn't have before. And what has been troublesome for our residents are the ones where someone has come in and bought a house. I mean, someone just bought a house behind me. I happened to talk to the realtor, and the first thing I said was, is this a person who's going to live here? And it was, or is it a corporation that's buying it to rent it out? And so that's, something that we all wouldn't have been thinking about 15 years ago. So making sure that our residential neighborhoods are residential, that we don't allow businesses of many different kinds. We don't allow hotels. We don't allow bed and breakfasts in our residential neighborhoods. And the Airbnbs that are not by the home, not where someone is living them, are, for the most people who aren't lawyers, kind of like, hotels and motels and bed and breakfasts in neighborhood. And so I really like the work that's come out of here. It allows single-family homeowners like myself or many other people in here to be able to use our homes, to do some renting out if we are a homeowner, if we live in the home. And I think that this is a way forward. I would hope that we would move forward with this. I did want to ask you on that vendor, do we already have any data from the vendor?
No.
Okay. And then I did have another actual question here. Is there anything here, or it would be somewhere else in our ordinances, that lays out the consequences of running an STR that isn't legal in any of these ways? And is that spelled out anywhere yet?
No.
Okay.
I think it would fall into I think that's probably in chapter 1 too, where it talks about penalties, and if they were to be cited for operating illegally, they would be subject to the citations as identified in, I think it's chapter 1
Okay.
of your ordinance, of the code.
Okay. That would just be good to know there as well. And also for the special use on the ones, is there any guidance provided in the ordinance about what would lead to approval of a special use?
Well, the special use is going to refer back to the special use chapter of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And
so the
it'll have those same
reasons, okay.
criteria that you already evaluate for others.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Culpepper?
Yeah, I think I understand. I just want to make sure. So if somebody's operating a short-term rental right now, and it's single family, but it's zoned single family, but they haven't had any problems with this, after 2 years, they're not going to be able to do that. Is that correct?
As presented, yes, from the planning commission. If it's an investment property that is nobody's residence first and foremost, it's been bought for the purpose of short-term rental, and it turns over regularly, and nobody actually lives there full-time. Under this proposal, they would have 2 years to bring it into compliance, and honestly, what that means is you're going to have to make modifications to that property and have somebody live there full-time, and then obtain a home occupation permit in order to use it.
And then, so we looked at several other municipalities that had similar short-term rental. Did any of them, I don't think they had sunset provisions in them, did they?
There are a lot of the ordinances that were referenced in the memo that you're talking about from the attorney's office that, and I've looked at them too, and what I see is the ordinances are silent on how they deal with legal nonconforming uses. They've established moving forward, but really don't talk about how to deal with those that are out there.
We couldn't identify any
In Georgia.
in Georgia.
Commissioner Culpepper, was that your last?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Hall?
Thank you. 3 questions and a couple quick thoughts. So first for you, Brad. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So the difference between AR and SR zoning here is really just how we're navigating the code, but the practical outcome is the same in each of those zones. Is that a good understanding on an elementary level?
The AR zone right now has a provision built into it that defines AR neighborhoods. And those are subdivisions that were developed in a defined pattern as a subdivision, but are currently in the AR zoning. In almost all cases, those subdivisions were created prior to the 2000 zoning ordinance that established the much larger lot size. Shoal Creek Farms, for example, is in the AR zone, but it would meet the criteria of an AR neighborhood. So you cannot ask for a special use permit in there. If you live in a house out in the country on 15 acres and it's an old farmhouse, you could ask for a special use permit to have it as a short-term rental. RS, there is no provision in RS. It's simply listed as not a permitted use.
Okay, but that L, okay, yeah, I think I get it now, okay. The next two are for Judd. So the first I want to add, if a sunset provision is included in this as proposed by the Planning Commission, and for some reason that part were to be struck down in a court, the rest of the ordinance could still stand, right? As long as we include the same language we usually do around if one portion of this ordinance
Yeah,
is struck down, the rest
we're
stands.
looking at making sure we have severability provisions there that would try to, as much as possible, protect the rest of the ordinance. So yes, we're trying to do that. I mean, I can't make any guarantees, but we've talked about that. I've talked about that with my staff, making sure we have severability provisions. That means that just because one portion of the ordinance is found, if it is struck down or found to be unconstitutional, the rest of the ordinance would still stand.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one, there is some interesting discourse on the Planning Commission about the idea that a company that owns a property could be sold to someone else. And then the property owner would still look the same on our tax records, like be the same LLC, but the person who owns that company, and therefore essentially the person or the people, the board or whatever that owns that LLC would be different. Does our ordinance or would the software in any way be able to track those sorts of situations? This might be a question for either of y'all.
So Georgia has laws that govern corporate governance and corporate structures. I would need to look into that. I'm not sure I understand the question. You're saying like a LLC the owners of an LLC may change, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and so like if
I don't know.
if Bob Smith, well, there's a lot of real Bob Smiths, but if an imaginary Bob Smith owns an LLC that owns a property, and then Bob Smith sells his LLC to Jim Jones, another imaginary Jim Jones, not a real one, Jim Jones keeps the same company name, and so Q Public and everything is still going to show the same property owner, but the person who owns the company changes. See what I'm saying?
I do. We can look into that.
There's one planning commissioner who seemed to think this was a deep concern, and another one who kind of dismissed it, and then it kind of just died there. And so I'd be really interested in staff's guidance on whether this is a legitimate concern to look into, and if so, how we could track it. And then I guess just my last thought for colleagues is I do hope that we can move forward on this. We've been talking about this for a long time. We're kind of living under this perpetual extension and re-extension of moratoria. I think we can always tweak the good ordinance change to be something more perfect in the future if we need to, but I think getting something on the books now is a good way to kind of solidify things moving forward. So I hope that we will do that. Thanks.
Commissioner Hampton?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And I share that concern about the LLCs. I could see where that might be an issue that we ought to look into to make sure we're covering the base there. I also think we ought to move forward on this. I appreciate your thoughts on it, but I certainly recognize what the folks in Riverbend and Glenwood and Millage Terrace and Parkway are dealing with, and I know they want us to move forward on doing something to help address this that's happening in single-family neighborhoods. And it's an ordinance that's not going after the good ones that are doing it, but it's going after folks that are the ones that are out of town and driving up prices for everybody in town as far as housing goes and such as that, but also creating quality of life issues within neighborhoods that other people have to deal with, and not knowing who to call and address some of the issues that are popping up. So am ready to move forward on it and appreciate the work staff has put into it. I would like to maybe discuss with some about how we can strengthen the grandfathering in part and the non-conforming part to see what could be done there. And from that standpoint, but I think you know, we have waited over a year for this, so it's time to move forward and get something going. And look forward to it. Thank you.
Any more comments from commissioners? Yes,
I do have
Myers.
one question. I know somewhere in one of the documents, there was mention of there being over 1,000, Airbnb short-term rentals. Do you remember which document that was in, of the many documents?
I mean, I think it's been referenced that we believe there are probably between 750 and 1,000 of
Okay.
them out there operating in some capacity. But until,
Oh, we don't know that, and we don't know how many of those are standalone houses that are not connected to a homeowner. So that could be 50%, it could be 25%. But, I mean, one of the things I think that is important to bring up is that, people can still profit from their investments because they can be transitioned into just normal rental units, has been the case. Or, of course, the property can be sold as well, which would provide more housing for our community in different places, whether it's sold or whether it becomes a rental, a long-term rental. So,
Madam Mayor, I have a follow-up question, if you don't
Yes, sir.
mind. So, and it's, I think Commissioner Myers also addressed something similar to this. So if there is an existence of a short-term rental that hasn't registered or gone through the software system, I'm assuming it's going to be incumbent upon us and the person we hire to help manage this to do something about it. Is that the way I'm seeing that?
I think so. I think it's twofold. I mean, the first, from the time that we published the list of who we have identified working in association with our vendor, the legal non-conforming properties that had rented during that 12-month period prior to September 19th, that list is going to be published on our website. It's going to be made available in the planning department and the word put out there. And then there's a 6-month period following that for people to check the list, make sure they are in fact on it and listed as legal non-conforming, and if they're not, procedures set up to allow them to make application and be considered to be added to the list, if that's what you were asking.
Well, I'm asking, I know there may be some folks who just started an Airbnb without going through the process or without getting a home occupation, whatever is needed. So how do you deal with that?
That's one of the key, following the establishment of that initial list, that's going to be one of the key components that the vendor's going to provide us is regular checks. I mean, it could be as, weekly, bi-weekly, of new sites that have popped up on one of the sites and cross-checked against the list of who we have either that have gone through the process and are legal or on the legal non-conforming list, and they're not on either one of them. They would identify staff, and that's really a primary function or one of the large functions of the position you're considering later that would work directly with the vendor, with code enforcement. Certainly, it's always our first objective to bring those properties into compliance before we seek any type of citation or anything else. It may just be they need to come get a home occupation permit and weren't aware, and that's a 30-minute process. Come to the office and apply and fill out the paperwork, and you're good.
And I guess, Brad, too, in thinking about like our two per family ordinance, I mean, is it going to be, sometimes that can be a little bit onerous to enforce. I hope this will be different.
No, it is not set up for the home occupation short-term rental. It's not restricted to definition of family, and in fact, we've taken it a step further where most of the home occupations restrict the use if you're operating a professional office out of your home. You can only use 25% of the heated floor space for that office use. In the case of short-term rental, you can only do it on one. If you've got an accessory structure in the backyard that's set up as a cottage in your house, you can't rent both of them. You can only do one or the other, but you could use the entire structure. And that's set up in the amendments to the home occupation ordinance. So you could rent your entire property for a football weekend and get out of town, but it's still first and foremost your primary residence.
Okay, okay. I guess I'm just looking at the enforcement aspect of it and making sure that it's strong, I guess is the right word, maybe. Judge looking at me like I'm nuts, but.
Well, that's true.
Yes, I mean, enforcement is, you should realize enforcement's gonna be a challenge, because you just can't go into somebody's house, you know. Our code enforcement officers you don't have the right on the law, you know, so I think what staff has recommended with the vendor to help us identify them online through the services, but still enforcement's gonna be really hard. It's gonna be very easy if they just list it on the site, you know, we don't see it. But ultimately, the problem is when you go there, you know, you have to have probable cause and all this, and so from our court enforcement perspective, it'll be challenging, you know. We had a seminar, this is a big topic statewide, our city county attorney seminars, and when around robin, people answering questions about other communities have done, all of them said that one of the biggest challenges is enforcement. But I think we're doing everything we can. I don't even think these other communities have done what we've done. You know, what staff has recommended about hiring the firm and all that, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. It's just going to be challenging for code enforcement, you know?
And that part-time person may need to eventually become full-time.
Yeah, might need to, right. So I think that's why they need a person, but I don't want to make it seem enforcement will be challenged. It just always is with things like this. But we're going to do everything we can.
Okay, just to give a comment, I think Commissioner Myers offered that she's done some study that maybe the commissioners that are still having some thoughts or questions, maybe y'all could all check in before voting session. How about that? Okay, you're still on.
I've got one last one that I promise this one is more straightforward and simple. For some of you veteran commissioners, you may remember us doing this, but we've not done this since late 18, early 19. What we're asking you for consideration is we need to go in and update the official zoning map that resides in the clerk's office to pull in and bring forward all of the zoning map changes that you all as a group have voted to approve in the last 4 years. If you ever wondered with the rezoning reports that you get, you always, at the back of them, there's a map, and it's called an attachment A map, and it's got a number on it, and it shows the change to the zoning map. All of that information is referenced on the little chart up on the right-hand side. I do that the Tuesday after your voting meeting every month in the clerk's office. We update the map with a reference to the attachment A's, and periodically from time to time, we need to go in, clean it up, take all of that handwritten information off, pull it into a new map. So the map that's on site here that you'll be asked to vote on in February represents all the changes that have been made, and it's clean and it's ready to start over again, and it replaces the map that you all adopted about 4 years ago by reference, and will be signed accordingly on the bottom. And it will be up here again for your voting meeting, and we ask you to vote to approve it and update it.
I see Commissioner Wright. I'm looking to my left now. Commissioner Wright.
So this is housekeeping,
Yes.
and not to be confused with any changes.
We forgot one step. You were so anxious, and I was too.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience, our guests, who would like to have any comments on our official zoning map that we'll be voting on next month? If so, please come up to the podium, give your name, and we would love to hear from you. Okay. In that case, Commissioner
Yes.
Wright?
There is, and this is probably the 6th or maybe 7th or 8th time that we've done this since I've been here. Periodically, sometimes we would bring these forward, and in addition to all the map changes that you all have voted on, there may be a few properties that were either purchased by the government or sold by the government, and we take that opportunity to make those map changes too. If that would have been the case, you would have also received a specific list of those properties, and I would have showed them to you on the screen. There are no changes on this map that are not changes that you all have voted on in the last 4 years.
Gotcha. So when we had a map at community conversation that we had in October, it would have been the other map, and then that row of changes would have been there.
Now, what you had in front of you at that meeting was not the official zoning map. The official zoning map does not leave the clerk's office. It's the map that is used in litigation purposes by reference. For purposes of, going to community meetings, of providing people, we update this map as we go. But it doesn't have the listings over in the side, and it's not listed as the official zoning map.
So, but it reflects the decisions we've made, and now we're looking
You're
at
making
the
it
February
official,
vote to
yes.
accept, so that that map is,
That's correct.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments?
And we can't put it on consent, right?
No, it's got to go through the same process as all other zoning actions.
Just checking.
Any more comments about the zoning map? Okay, Brad, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Brad.
Moving right along, we are headed now into, on our agenda, old business. And we are looking at items 17 through 19.
And number 10.
And 10. And, well, 10 I thought was going to go under the new, under new business. Okay, so we're going to go with 17 through 19. Again, agendas were out there in the hallway. Is there any public input on items 17 through 19? Okay. All right, well, it's open to you guys. 17. I see Commissioner Wright. Okay, and Commissioner Davenport.
Well, I wanted to speak on 17, so I appreciate you guys supporting me, having a hold on it, because Manager Williams has gotten together the relevant staff to meet with some of the Bottle Works area people, and I'll be emailing them out. So it's January 25th from 4 to 5 over at the closed-off North Newton, and weather permitting, otherwise we'll be in the tunnel of Bottle Works out of the weather to have an on-site discussion and roll out this improvement that's being asked for safety with input from those in the area. So, so there you have it. So that was my update.
What was that date again?
It's Thursday, January 25th from 4 to 5 on site. And county manager's going to have staff there to go over it. And anybody who wants to join us is welcome.
Sounds great. Commissioner Davenport, did I see your hand?
Just leave off consent.
Okay. Okay. All right. Item number 18, any comments from the audience? Our guest?
Staff holds.
Staff?
Staff holds.
Okay. Oh, I do see that staff hold. Then we're down to number 19. Any?
Yeah.
Oh, any thoughts from our, no? Okay, I see Commissioner Myers, I see Commissioner Houle, Commissioner Myers, Houle, and Culpepper.
I just wanted to see what the manager had in terms of an update on the information, and it looked like he was about to talk about that anyway.
Well, I believe staff has given the vendor the deadline of this Thursday to respond, and so hopefully we'll have some information. As soon as I get it, I'll package it up and send it out to the commission
Okay, thank you.
regarding the questions that were asked at the previous commission meeting.
Commissioner Houle?
I had the same question. I just asked to keep it off consent until we get that information.
Okay. Commissioner Culpepper?
So we're holding 18, right, because we don't have the information. Is that correct?
Well, we might.
We're at number 19 now, but it does say on 18 that staff requested a
So
hold.
we're not, it'll be on the,
We're going to push that a month.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts between these three old business items? All right, now we're heading to new business, and Carol Myers, you have the floor.
Oh, yeah, on that, it's very small here. This is just a question. I can leave this on consent, but I did have a question. Actually, maybe not even a question, but something to urge, a small thing, and that is, there's mention in this is that new, that area that's down by the Sandy Creek Nature Center, where the museum, what do we call that? The museum is, the new museum versus the old place where I used to go when my kids were little, in that area there. And I know there's going to be a pollinator garden right at the beginning and a bench. I would urge staff to consider putting a couple of more benches, especially at these parts of these trails that are close to the parking lots. As we think of our populations, our senior populations, our people who are challenged physically, and young people to, I know that we don't always have that many benches, so I wanted to use this as an opportunity. I'm going to be pushing benches on the Firefly and other places, so I just wanted to convey that, and we can leave it on consent.
Okay. Again, I probably have been saying this all night about if there's any comments, and nobody has any comments, but does anybody have any comments that are visiting with us from, now it would be 21 down to 28 on the agenda? No?
20? 20.
Yeah, it changed because we added hers, but yes. So now we're down to, it would have been originally 20.
Yeah, so 20 to 20.
Hello, I'm Clint Moore, 228 Parkway Drive here in Athens. Given the strains, I guess, on Code Enforcement Division, the workload on the officers in that group, I do think that hiring a STR coordinator is a really good idea. One concern that I had when I was reading the literature is that the position description doesn't match the description of the listed tasks in the agenda item. Specifically under item 8 in the facts and issues section, one of the listed tasks is to initiate enforcement action for non-compliant properties. But the position description in attachment 3 doesn't list this as one of the essential duties. With reference to enforcement in the attachment 3, there's really only passive language such as development of goals for enforcement activities and maintaining documentation on enforcement activities. I don't see listed in the position duties any accountability of any sort that where codes will be enforced or followed up with penalties and sanctions. So there's just inconsistency between what's in the agenda item and what's in the proposed position description. Also, I guess it would be useful to have some clarification that the annual salary for the position will be around $37,000, which is in attachment 2, but and not the $18,000 that's listed on the agenda item. I'm guessing maybe, is that for a partial budget year or something? I don't know. So I just point those two things out. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Anybody else would like to speak to, well, now, it's like I said, it's 21. Anybody else would like to speak to 21? Okay.
Madam Mayor, is this for everything items 20 to 31?
Yes.
All at once?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm just going, through all of them, and then I'm gonna let all of us have comment. Is that okay?
No.
No, it's not.
If there's any public comment, then now's the time to take that public comment, and then we start discussing the issues.
He said, okay, they have got me on the right track here, so what we're going to do, any comments on any of these items? Because they're ready to go to talk about this. 20 to 31, how about that? Anybody? Okay, So we're going to turn it now into our conversation. Commissioners, Mr. Moore just spoke on the establishment, so we'll have any comments there at least, if possible. And I think it kind of alluded to what you were, your hand, I'm sorry. Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my recommendation will be to pull this,
Which one?
number
Okay.
20.
Okay.
Until we, I appreciate our constituents bringing up some key points in the job description. I think that's critical. And until we make a decision what we're gonna do, I don't think we should be doing anything for what type of position we want to establish until we get everything in, until we have a vote. So I'm gonna recommend that we pull this until we at least get the job description right for what we want the job description to be, and make sure we got the terminology right. And I'm not sure what the salary is, to be honest with you. So I think we need to straighten all those things out first, and then before we figure out whether or not it's gonna pass, then if we do pass, then we come back to this and then establish a position possible.
Okay.
I have a comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
I could address some of Commissioner Fisher's concerns. So if there are citations to be given, this position will refer them to the code enforcement officers of that appropriate zone, and they'll write it. It is a draft job description, but it's got most everything in there that we intend the folks to do. I agree that, until you pass a law, though, we don't know exactly what we're going to enforce. But until there is a process approved, and until we have someone, it's going to be very difficult to enforce it. So I don't disagree with the timing, but we'll need that position if you ultimately want to enforce something. Because we've had different amounts of properties from different consultants. Somebody says 750, somebody else says 1,200, but there's hundreds of them. And so this will be a key position when y'all do decide to move forward.
Okay.
Sorry.
Commissioner Wright?
Well, that clarifies a little bit. My comment was in line with, I felt that this job would be a code enforcement ability, not just what's coming as a new discussion or approval, but the current quality of life ordinances that we had. LRC worked really hard on noise ordinances. We tried to address the party house thing, and we've got the parking on front lawns and the various nuisance violations, more than two unrelated, those ordinances. And I feel that making sure we have teeth to go with what we currently have, and I would hope that this position would be part of the teeth that we have in helping out with not just a narrow focus of what they're doing, but any of the quality of life scenarios that come into play on properties, because, as noted, knowing whether it's a short-term rental that's making these nuisance violations, they still should be able to write up the issue that is causing the quality of life issues. That's my hope for that position.
Commissioner Hamby, Commissioner Houle, Commissioner Davenport, did I see your hand? Commissioner Hamby and Commissioner Houle.
Sure, thank you, Mayor, and Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to ask the manager, so if we were to, and I agree with Commissioner Wright on what she's saying about making sure this position has the teeth necessary within the next couple of weeks before we vote on this. Is that something we can do to modify the job description to match what it is we're actually looking for out of this position? Sure. And maybe even give us a scenario where we can consider, I know it's being recommended as a part-time position, but what a full-time position would entail for this as well, because I certainly see a lot of work initially for this to get going. I also think too, though, that I think too, regardless of how the other vote may or may not go, that this is a position that's needed to look into the situation that we currently have on the ground right now, as far as somebody to help us with existing short-term rentals and making sure that if there is a situation, problems could be addressed. Like, for example, I'm aware of a situation of a short-term rental where people were using the neighbor's driveway and folks got blocked in trying to get to work the next morning, and it's, and who to call to get that situation resolved would be helpful for a lot of folks. I mean, there's another situation where temporary, I don't know if it's temporary or not, but there's a lot of gravel that's been put down for a parking pad that hasn't gotten permitted to do that. So who do you call to do that, and who can help us do that? And I know code enforcement has a lot on their plate already, but certainly I see this as a position that could be added to our code enforcement operations to address. Thank you.
Commissioner Hall, then, did you have a comment? Manager, did you?
I was just going to say, thank you, Commissioner Hamby, and full-time position is what's recommended at this point. Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Hall, then Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page here. So the agenda item maps out a full-time position, but the money allocated on here is reflecting the fact that we're mid-budget, which is why it's not the full salary right away. But then it would be part of our budget. If we put this position on the books, the recommended budget, we could anticipate staff would include the full salary amount in the full budget, right? So the other question I wanted to ask staff was, can you just clarify the, average turnaround time from commission decides to create position to person is actually hired? Just with how long it takes to post and interview and hire and all that.
Sure. I mean, you're looking at 90 to 120 days, perhaps. 30 days to advertise, 30 days, first interviews, getting in the second ones, and then sometimes you want to offer a little bit of time if they're leaving another position to give grace there. So there's a little bit of a fuse on that.
Well, yeah, I guess I just urge colleagues to consider this seriously as we move toward the voting meeting, because if we are to pass the ordinance revision as proposed or something similar to it regarding short-term rentals, I think for us to be effective in that at all, whatever the best chances that we have, it sounds like we would need this position. And that basically means we're looking at 90 to 120 days from when we put the ordinance on the books to when we can start doing anything about it. So kicking the can on hiring the person, I think, would only work against our goals of the ordinance if we are to pass that. And then as far as ordering, I mean, I'm assuming this is going to remain on old business and that we will consider the zoning items before old business. So similar to how we'll have like a pump station separate from a zoning matter and we can consider them in whatever order we want, we could do the same here.
Commissioner Myers? Commissioner Myers?
I can, I was just saying as well, I mean, I think that when we get to voting on this, that this comes after voting on the text amendment. And so if the text amendment doesn't pass, then we can either put a hold or deny this one. But I would prefer to leave it on because I know, we all know that without having enforcement and someone who's watching over this, that ordinance won't have much teeth at all. I too would like to make sure, this is in code enforcement, this position. And so I'd like to make sure that, that the position does have teeth and to make sure to clarify why, between now and then, why this would, I mean, it says in here, initiate enforcement action for non-compliant properties, why they wouldn't be doing all that code enforcement had to do. Do they have to pass it off to someone? And if there's an answer right now, fine, but I'd like to make it so that this position has as much power to do what code enforcement does as it should be able to do.
Well, I think we'd envisioned it as a coordinator to help run the program. We could hire them in as a code enforcement officer. I have to check with HR and see, if there's any extra associated with that, but we can certainly look into that.
Okay. Commissioner Hall?
I realize I forgot to add the question I actually arrived here with, which is just if staff could provide a little more information on how you envision this position as a full-time position being justified after we get over kind of the hurdle of enacting the code. When I read through what's in here, it seemed to me pretty obvious why a position would be justified in like year 1 or 2. But a little harder to understand how that workload would remain the same once you kind of get over that transition hurdle. So if there's any information staff could provide on how the workload would remain full-time level in perpetuity, that would be helpful too.
Well, I think part of the issue will be, a lot of times these vacation or short-term rentals occur on weekends. And so I would expect that there may be some schedule considerations for this person who are investigating complaints and things of that nature, which our current code enforcement officers are full-time 5 days a week, and then the administrative of that. But we can give you some further detail on that. Thank you.
In addition to that, I would add education and outreach, that's never going to stop, right? As long as we have a short-term rental program, education and outreach is never going to stop.
Thanks.
Okay. All's good. Old Jefferson Road Sanitary Sewage Pump Station. I see Commissioner Davenport. I see Commissioner Davenport.
I just got a question. Did we approve a plan development for this site? Or are we just going to just agree to,
Jefferson.
yeah, did we agree to a plan development for this site? I can't remember.
I believe that's correct. Now, the CDO that laid all this out may have been a separate agenda item, but we'll have to go back and research that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to ask to keep it off consent to get a little bit of information clarified about the nature of this, but yeah, that's all.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Whose district is that? It's not my district.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thanks, Commissioner.
But it used to be 5, now it's 6, so I'm less familiar with the details of this development and would like to understand that fully before
So you want to keep, what was your?
I just want to keep it off consent in case
Okay.
for some reason, as I learn more from staff, I learn something I don't like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. The RAISE 2024 Planning Application Grant for Connections on Hawthorne and Oglethorpe Avenue Corridors.
Hopefully consent.
Consent?
You got one?
The SS4A Action Planning Grant, Envision, oh yeah, I like this. Envision a Safe Athens Design and Planning Services Contract.
Consent.
I hope y'all say consent on this one.
Consent.
That's what, yeah, okay. Amendments to the West Broad Hawthorne area TAD boundaries.
Not consent.
Not consent. Yeah, cool.
Oh, did I skip? No? I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. Mm-hmm, yeah, that's consent. You said not consent. Okay.
23 is not consent.
No, ma'am, 24.
We skipped 23.
What about 23?
The action plan grant. Did you do 23? Oh, no, it is on consent.
Yeah.
22 and 23 on consent.
Yes, ma'am. Now we're at the amendments to West Broad and Hawthorne area TAD boundaries. Not consent. You, Commissioner Fisher, would you like to speak to that or just not consent?
Yeah, I will, as part of my district, I think I just need more information, why West Broad was added into that, part of that TAD, and don't know why, so I just like to have some more information about that, and I don't mind sharing, but I just think that, I just like to have more information about why West Broad was added to that particular TAD.
Now, this was the one, Madam Clerk, and I want to make sure I do this right. This was the one that we talked about discussion and consent. Madam Clerk, could you help me?
It needs still discussion if you want some information or discussion.
Just, okay.
Yes.
It should not be on consent.
Madam
should
Mayor
not
Pro
be-
Tem?
Yes.
I can answer a few questions now if you'd like or not.
Well, I mean, I saw some of the history and that, but I mean, I'm just trying to figure out did something change to add West Broad within there, or?
So, a property owner adjacent to the district approached the mayor Beechwood Shopping Center and said that they are unable to redevelop that property in a way that they would want to with stormwater and that type of thing without some future assistance. The mayor also looked at possibly the idea of adding some of the properties down on Sycamore, a lower income neighborhood, to where maybe some good things could be done down there as well, and asked staff to bring forward this request to add properties to the TAD. If you were to approve this as written, you would not be approving the final addition of these properties. But as you might appreciate, we would have to amend the redevelopment plan, which means that staff would put in a good bit of work, and we'd have to consult with attorneys that advise us on TAD things to come back. So what we're looking for is direction in both this one and the next agenda item to say, okay, we're willing to entertain this, and we understand you're going to do some work to bring it back to us. So that's kind of the 1-2 step of this. But we were asked to bring these forward to you.
And I think what Commissioner Fisher articulated to me, he wanted to have that discussion that you're just talking about.
Sure.
So.
Right.
Discuss, that's what he wants, more detailed discussion.
No problem.
Okay, and also,
I just want to share the parameters for everybody.
The Beechwood property is a great property, and they're doing development now over there. So without any TAD assistance, so I'm seeing development. But then I'm gonna yield to my colleague, Commissioner Culpepper, because part of his district too. But again, I don't mind sharing, but I want no reason why all this, is tied in. I appreciate your answer, but yeah.
And I do think, I know that, and I probably should have mentioned it at the beginning, we need to keep Commissioner Link in our thoughts and prayers. She's dealing with some health things. I know she wants to be part of a discussion too, so, discussion. Okay. The amendments to East.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you had it.
Yeah, so we're going to bring up, you're going to give us more information to discuss this? Is that what the next step is?
Sure, we'll provide some along the lines of what I mentioned in the follow-up report. Like here's why, how it came to be. Most of it's in the agenda items Commissioner Fisher referenced, but understand that you all have some additional questions you may want to ask too.
Now, I think on the Beechwood side, I think it's good. They're doing a good job redevelopment, but I think it is an older property, and so he is limited to what he can do because of the infrastructure below, and it's really helped that area, so.
Okay. Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, this discussion, I think, covered a lot of the questions I came here with. But I think one thing I want to clarify, we have 6 TADs, and this is the first time we're being asked to consider revising the map boundary of one of them. And in previous discussions, I understood that there was kind of this maybe unofficial desire, consensus among staff to not adjust any of the maps for about 5 years, and this is obviously sooner than that. And so I'm just curious, if this process moves forward and if we're having to bring in consultants and everything again, should we also be looking at the other map boundaries at the same time so that we're not repeatedly paying more than we need to for these consultants to come in and do that work, or, would it?
So, for instance, you're going to pay per TAD. So, if you do this, then there'll have to be a new school impact analysis run, and that's a set amount. So,
Does staff already have an estimate on the cost of this, roughly?
We can get one.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful. I
Okay.
think just because, if we're gonna, send you all doing all this work, I think it would be helpful to know how much it's really costing us and whether we think that that's worth it. I guess there's just something that seems a little odd to me about the way this got here, but other things haven't. And I'd hope that maybe we could find a way. This is me speaking more to my colleagues. Think through what kind of process can we set up for revising TAD boundaries, so we don't just sort of end up in a situation where a random property owner can request it of the right person and it gets there. But that's all.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry. I will say, in looking at when we passed the TADs, this one to me didn't make as much sense because it didn't hit on a lot of the properties that, when you're looking at the redevelopment of West Broad and Hawthorne, that it should have hit on. So I'm glad it's on here because I think it gives us an opportunity to go back and and look and see about some of the opportunities that we have in redeveloping Hawthorne and Alps, around Alps and this part of West Broad. So I'm looking forward to seeing that map, and we're looking at that map and moving forward with this. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on Commissioner Davenport?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Aiden. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was, oh.
So we have a limit. It is not listed in any of the facts and figures. I think we have a limit of 10% of TAD properties, tax something. Can you explain that? And will this go over, and where are we now?
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. So, yes, it is in state law that you should not bind, if you will, or bind up within these tax allocation districts any more than 10% of the total value of the digest. When the TADs were initially put in, all 6 totaled up to around 7%. Of course, their value vis-a-vis all the other value of the digest changes each year. So we did a most recent calculation, and it's actually 5% or so right now. So the all 6, and if you were to do this, if you were to accept this as proposed, then it would take the total up to 6% of it. So there's still some capacity there based on some calculations by the tax assessors.
So I just want to mention that if we go back to the other 5 TADs, that, you know, we have a limit. So, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Commissioner Fisher?
Just food for thought. Commissioner Hull triggered something with me. We was talking about when we split up these TADs. Would it be a bad idea if each commissioner or district had a TAD? And I'm not sure what criteria are used to get these TADs out, because I'm not that much educated on that, but is it a bad idea for each district to have a TAD? Since we've been proposing this, and some of these things that we're talking about now, they're not, want to overlap. So just food for thought.
There's certainly nothing to prevent you from doing that other than the 10% governor that Commissioner Davenport referenced. I mean, I guess they could be seen somewhat as political things, but it's really meant to help to instill redevelopment of areas that are deprived of that. And there are certain criteria that when you're writing the redevelopment plan, whether it's blight or some infrastructure deficiencies or something like that, that would help to make the case that it needed to be a TAD. Now, of course, anything that you bind up in a TAD, none of those future increment will go to the general fund. So you're taking it out of the general fund and kind of keeping that. So that's another consideration as well.
Commissioner Myers?
I just wanted to, for the record, say that there's another commissioner who wants to understand the process through which this extension was happening. I mean, in the history, it says, using passive voice, on October 24th, Mayor Gertz received a request to expand the boundaries. And that's all that's there. There's not an explanation of that. And so, again, in that kind of question of well, there's all these other TADs, and how is this process unfolding here? I know in terms of development, there's wonderful development going over on the east side. I mean, development happens without TADs. I mean, the Kroger's redevelopment in the abandoned Kmart building is finally moving without the help of a TAD. So I think we have to realize as well that development can happen. Okay, there. But I would like to understand more, because it feels like this is something that's just kind of being slipped in, and we can go well, what about those other ones? Is there another little parcel here or there? How did this happen? I want to be able to defend it and understand it better.
Thank you. Commissioner Hull?
Yeah, I guess just briefly, hearing that I'm not the only one, and maybe if there's a soft consensus of nods or whatever staff feels they need, but if I'd be interested in staff bringing forward any information or potential recommendation you'd have on what a process could look like. I think it's important for us to recognize that as TADs become a thing more and more people are aware of, and we start establishing a couple of CBAs on a couple given projects, probably going to get a lot more requests like this. And I think if we're really thinking about having like an equitable process for things to happen, it would be good for that to be transparent at the outset. Even if that process is anyone who's interested request of the mayor for him to consider putting it on, and then the commission will consider if they agree, right? But I do find it interesting also, piggybacking on what Commissioner Myers said, that the Facts and Issues with its passive voice gives sort of a semi-story about one of the parcels being added, and we got more information tonight on that, but it doesn't really give any background on the other parcels. So, I assume that's other things that the mayor has talked about with people or whatever, but, now that we've got these established, we've been learning as we go, I think it would be advisable for us to really have a process in place before we move forward on any given expansion. And I would welcome staff's suggestion on what that process could look like. If others agree with?
I would like to also mention to the mayor, just as a suggestion, this might be one of our topics that we can discuss at our retreat, which is the 26th.
Yes.
And that would be it doesn't change your thing for discussion, but just if we could get some information and if you can run it by the mayor, if this is, a good idea. Okay. All right. Anybody, any other thoughts?
Not on consent.
No, no, it's not on consensus. He already said it's definitely not on consensus. This is the amendments to the East Downtown TAD Development Plan to include mandatory distribution of tax increments of East Athens.
I move that we hold it because let's just try again. I've talked about it all day. 30%, I know this is probably just, a speaking point, but 30% to enter East Athens is a slap in the face. We have been under-allocated and underfunded. I'm 35, I was born and raised there, and nothing has changed. So for us to have a development like this monstrosity that's coming, and all of the dollar signs or dollar tags that are attached to it, not to mention the taxpayer dollars that has went to the building of this, as well as private funding from other developers, 30% to this predominantly African-American district that doesn't have any money. Direct quote from Paul Kramer. No, I would like to have this pulled off of consent until, they start putting respect on East Side's name. 30% is not respectable.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Wright.
Right. I apologize. My computer's been in IT, so I'm not as, I'm just comparing the asks of these two TADs. First of all, I'm glad they're off consent. I heard they've been on consent to begin with. And so that we can talk through, these are coming forward, I think, in a way that we can be discussing them. I feel like the TAD at the mall, that you guys were in warp speed on a very huge thing, and I appreciate your all's time with that. But to your point, I didn't have, when this started in learning TADs, there wasn't a TAD in District 4. And then the maps changed, and now I'm learning TADs because they are in my district. So I support Commissioner Taylor in needing time if we need to hold this at the voting meeting, because it sounds like the first TAD, 24, is changing the boundaries, which seems like a pretty big ask for the process that's been underway. And then the 25, the East Downtown, which the Riverside, one side's my district and the other side is Commissioner Taylor's, to be discussing allocations, especially with that recommendation. If I were to move this forward, it would be 30 for the Classic Center side. So, and that would be 70 on the East Athens neighborhood side. So I'm not going to try to think that we can in 2 weeks iron this out, but we can also learn why there's these two different asks happening, and that could be a discussion in the retreat, because these are big asks right now on these two agenda items.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So this is not on consent. Commissioner Taylor has requested hold-in. I guess we'll see if we can start that discussion at the retreat also, and then we'll go from there. Is that okay? Legislative Review Committee report. Yay, that's us. Commissioner Myers.
Yes, I just want to go over this with everyone here, and I'll ask Assistant Manager Nikki Jones to chime in afterwards if I've left out any key points. But this is something we've been working on since actually this summer, and I was just thinking that there's a lot of details in here, and I will reach out in between now and the next couple of weeks to those commissioners who are not on that committee to see if you have any questions about it. But basically, this is the program that deals with speeding and traffic calming in neighborhoods. And we are moving to an automated, data-driven program. And that for me, that was a little like, where is this data coming from? And perhaps I'm getting this wrong. I just came up with this today, thinking about it. The same data that enables me to know when there's traffic when I drive to Atlanta, because the big data is there pulling together where our cell phones are, allows us to know how many people are driving on roads and how fast they are going. And so instead of having a program where it has to be initiated, and there's a lot of work to put on residents and staff at the upfront, this is going to use that data to rank the streets to find out which are most in need of traffic calming measures. And residents will still be notified. Everyone will still be notified that this is happening, but now the residents will not have to take an action unless they want to opt out of that. It's really important to know that this program is for local roads with speeds generally 25 miles and below it. What we call collectors, the Georgia Department of Transportation, and arterial roads, they would be under another program that could be developed and are actually the roads where there are more serious accidents as well. We will finish out, what's important to know here is that we're going to finish out the program that we're under right now and the funding that we've done. And then there are some roads that are kind of like in the midst. There's maybe, like they're in the middle of the whole process. We're going to just put them at the end of they're going to go to the top of the list before we start on the new one. And we will also be working on an opt-in program for neighborhoods that want to self-fund that, but we're getting this program up and running, and then we're going to go and work on a opt-in program, and we'll bring that to you guys all later on. I think I've covered everything, haven't I?
You did, Commissioner Myers, and I think you did a great job. I would just add, currently the program is the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program.
yes.
It will transition over to the Residential Traffic Management Program. So this is going to be a data-driven approach, like you said. We're adding new evaluation criteria. We're defining local roads in the past where we didn't define those local roads. And the second part of all of this is, this list that Commissioner Myers referenced. A CDO in May spoke to the pilot, the permanent portions of this list. That would be attachment, or that is an attachment here. And then we also discussed the legacy list, if you will, making sure that that legacy list remained under the NTMP program before we transition over to the RTMP program.
Okay.
That's it. And do any of my colleagues here have any questions? Or any of the people who are on the LRC with me want to add anything in, things that I've missed?
She called on her colleagues.
Oh.
Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to clarify that last thing that you spoke to, Assistant Manager Jones, which is captured in History 8. Does that need to be included in what we formally adopt, like whatever motion, or is that default included if we adopt this policy as is? I just want to make sure that we're clear as a body about whether we want to include that as part of what we're doing from here.
If I remember correctly, out of committee, there were two different recommendations, the policy, if you will, and then the list. So I do think both of those need to be acted on.
So should we be expecting like a second agenda item or just some additional language wrapped into this one? I'm just trying to make sense
Right.
of how we make sure we do that.
I think we could do it all in this one. If we need to add some language that you see that's appropriate, we can do that.
Yeah, maybe just something that says like, adopting the plan as captured in History 8, or however you want to
Certainly.
word that, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Wright?
I think you've ignored me long enough. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, my God.
I just wanted to say that this has been some good work, and it also spun off a little bit from corridor committee work, and that the name change is going to help us, too, with the difference of the legacy group that was the previous criteria versus the new criteria, if and when this passes. But if commissioners that are in GOC want to reach out to any of the LRC people, we'll be happy to help you through any of the stuff. But it's been documented really well here in the packet.
It has.
Very well. We could start off with maybe putting it on consent.
Well, Commissioner Hamby has a
It's
comment.
just for clarification, so I just want to make sure, when we're talking about list and stuff, we're not, the list that we have funded already is not being impacted.
That's right.
Not at all. That's the permanent and the pilot. Well, the pilot's not totally funded, first off. The pilot has $100,000 associated with it.
Right.
The permanent's totally funded, and that's what went out for
So
an
we're
RFP.
still on track for
Yes, sir.
doing those,
Yes, sir.
doing those speed tables.
That's
that
correct.
we've already contracted with.
And I do think that I also.
Make sure, I'm sorry.
And I think we should, if I'm right, we should see work beginning in March around this.
I believe that's what staff had said. I can confirm.
It is what staff said. Yes.
Okay. Yes,
I've
Commissioner
confirmed
Myers?
3 times now.
Yeah, I actually think it's in a little different place because it's, the way this is laid out is a little different than our other agenda items, but in the recommendations on page 3, it kind of lays out what the motion should be that captures what Commissioner Hool brought up and also addresses what you just brought up, Commissioner Hamby.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, we're moving right along. Consent?
Consent, please.
Consent.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
East Side Corridor Improvements Project.
Consent.
Consent.
I beat you to it.
Anybody want to explain to the listening audience?
If it's good,
Participator.
if it's
I would
good.
like to explain. First of all, thank Myers because she did most of the legwork, and Taylor and I. So last year budget we included $30,000 to be used to help beautify East Athens, and this is just one of the steps. They'll direct the manager to lead the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission to come up with a plan to figure out a spot on the east side of Athens to play some art.
To say that.
Play some art.
Oh,
Put
okay.
some art.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing before we put it onto consent, which I'd love to do, with Manager Williams, that the groups, there's going to be, it's not spelled out here and exactly in the agenda report, but there's going to be a place in the process for these these area group input from residents.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Manager Williams, also for the schools too, right? So like Gaines School maybe, Burnett Shows maybe, just like kind of like.
Reach out.
Yeah.
Yes, no, we'll definitely notify. In fact, we may end up having a public meeting over there in one of the schools, you know.
That'd be great.
If they're, I don't want to sign them up for that, but we'll ask them.
It could be kind of like the street sweeper contest I won in the 5th grade. That's my claim to
5th
fame.
grade?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're moving right along. Resolution revising rules of commission. There's been a lot of conversation about that, so.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Who?
Yes, I do agree that we need to discuss the rules of commission, and it sort of fell out of being a routine thing that we would talk about and do at the beginning of the year. But I think that we should discuss it as a group in a retreat. So I'll be making a motion at the voting meeting to hold this till we have, as a team group, ability to talk about what we would like to put in to capture what we're already doing, like the 3-minute timing, as well as just being a document that we come together with instead of it coming out from an email.
Sounds good. Commissioner Fisher? Ditto. Commissioner Who?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's fine. I guess I'd just like to point out, we've been operating this way for about 2 years at least. So I would ask of colleagues, if we don't want to, I see this almost as like akin to adopting a zoning map that just puts the right colors in the places where we've already adopted rezones. Like, this is us just modifying the applicable section to match the practice we've been using for years, which is that Gene sets the timer at 3 minutes instead of 5 minutes. So, I mean, totally agree that we should talk about more than just this, and maybe even this should be tweaked, but in my mind, if we don't adopt this, then we'd be basically instructing Gene to start giving us 5 minutes again, because that's what our rules say. So I would hope that we would just, adopt this to have the language in our own policy match our behavior. But,
Okay.
and still have the discussion in the retreat. But.
Commissioner Fisher?
I do want to add, to my ignorance, didn't even know though we had a rules of the commission. So I never knew about this. It wasn't part of our onboarding, so this is something new to me. So that's why I want to have further discussion. So.
Well, we meet on the
Commissioner,
26th, is that right?
Who?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to ask, I don't know if this is attorney staff or Clerk Spratlin, but if we don't adopt this, would you see that as essentially instruction to go back to 5 minutes? Or would we keep just doing 3 minutes, even though our policy says 5?
Well, we've been doing 3 minutes for a long time, so I think we would keep doing 3 minutes,
Okay.
I understand you're saying it technically hasn't been approved, but that hasn't been I can't sit here and say, no, we got to go back to 5 minutes. I think we've been doing it, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah. I guess the whole thing just seems odd to me then, why we wouldn't codify it. Like, if we all agree we want to at least keep doing this thing this way.
Sounds like something we can address on the 26th.
Yeah. Right, we're not doing it.
Okay, I saw Commissioner Culpepper's finger.
Well, I was just going to make a comment. We've been doing it for 2 years, but Commissioner Fisher, Taylor, and myself have only been here for a year, and we haven't had any input on this, so I think it'd be good for us to be able to put our input into it.
Okay.
John just wants us to go to 1 minute.
Because he goes no minutes hardly, right?
Gene, look at Gene.
Manager Williams, there are a couple of things that I'm making notes that need, thank you. Okay, okay. All right, that's on hold. We'll discuss hopefully at the retreat. ARP Salvation Army Scope and Contract, and it still is listed here as title only.
Title only for last three. Good to go. Motion to adjourn.
We're good to go. Title only.
Okay,
Any
okay.
updates?
In time for the
Motion to
8:15
adjourn.
break?
Oh, it is, no, is it, what time is it? Oh, you got 15 more minutes. Title only, okay, Athens Land Trust. And this is for those who are looking at, this is the McBurney House that we're talking about. The 853 Reese Street Rehabilitation Funding and Adjustments, title only. I do think that Commissioner Link wants to have some input on this. I don't, I can't pull it off of, but, okay.
It's not on consent. It's
Okay.
not on.
Okay, revisit EMS memorandum of understanding with Piedmont Athens Regional Medical Center. Title only.
Any updates, though?
Commissioner Hull?
Yeah, I mean, akin to what Commissioner Davenport just said, I guess I would ask for this or either of the previous two items, perhaps especially because they are just title only, if staff has any information that would be helpful to clarify what we can expect from any of these, I would find that helpful. And then I had a few questions about the EMS MOU specifically that I've sent by email, so we don't have to belabor those today unless that's part of what you've already got information about. But yeah, I'd just be curious if you have any information about any of these three things.
Sure, 2-minute on that, and also number 30 and 31, we'll probably go ahead and post that in the next couple of days, even though we may not have the final information. With respect to the McBurney House, as y'all remember, that was something that came about as a negotiation with the developer that acquired the varsity, and the commission wanted to protect that very important cultural resource. And so the government actually approached the land trust to take the property and rehabilitate it. And there were some things that were required that nobody really understood at the time, a parking lot because of planning things. And then, so this is about adding some funds to make that, to complete that project. The EMS, we've got a sample MOU with the language that I'm circulating amongst the various partners, the two hospitals in Oconee County, and we're waiting for their feedback. I'm trying to hold it, so if we get that, we can go ahead and get it approved and move on, but it has been some months. So 30 and 31, I'm sorry, 29 and 31 may not go in this cycle because we don't want to leave it to the last minute, but we're hopeful that we can get those over the hump. And 30, we feel confident we can go ahead and submit that for a vote on February 6th and should have you a finalized agenda item the next couple of days. So that's on those three title onlys.
Okay.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
Yes, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.